to do sim racing at home and the passion for cars and everything, and then being able to go to kind of the upper sort of echelons, if you say, but kind of the top tier of GT3 racing. Yeah, not something you'd ever think was possible, but now with technology and sim racing and all that stuff, it's pretty crazy what can happen. So, yeah, pretty fortunate to be a part of it all. But on the other side, also be able to make the opportunity happen too when I had it. So that was cool.
Nice. Yeah, I guess to kind of go back a little bit before we move forward and talk more about your racing over in the endurance series in Europe. Back when we were kids in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, late 90s, sorry. Matt was even then back then beating me on video games. We have a 6-year age gap. So to hand a controller to your much younger brother that you kind of look at and go, here you go, mate, good luck. And then he takes a ghost on Gran Turismo, so your fastest lap, and destroys it by 3 or 4 seconds, and you don't bloody know how. And you spend the next couple of months chasing down this bloody ghost that drives away from you in every corner. Was very humiliating as a self-confessed car nut as a young kid. And then when Gran Turismo offered this opportunity, and Matt said that like there was this thing called GT Academy, and that potentially you could get an option to actually race for Nissan, I couldn't believe it. It was like two worlds had collided. This intense skill that Matt had to translate simulator driving into actual speed in the game was incredible to see that he had an opportunity. So the first year, which I think was in 2014, he actually came to Melbourne because they held it at the Rick Kelly Motorsport, the Kelly Motorsport factory, because they were Nissan drivers back then. Yeah. And sadly, Matt didn't make the cut for the top 6, and purely just because of a shoelace that came undone during a beep test. He was very fit. He still is very fit.
Yeah, one of those things that can happen in competition. But I finished 7th and was a reserve driver. So if someone had ended up pulling out, then I'd go.
Yep.
But I guess when you look at how it all planned out, it was the best thing that shoelace was probably the best thing that ever happened for me.
Oh, so absolutely. I remember you being so devastated after you didn't make the cut for the top 6 to be able to qualify to go overseas to contend for the championship and get this contract to be a Nissan driver. But I remember you saying right there and then, I'm going to come back next year. I'm going to spend the whole year doing track days, getting ready. I'm going to change my job. I'm going to put everything around giving this my best shot, because who knows how many more years they're going to do this. And he came back in 2015 with a vengeance. Everybody at the event knew he was gunning for it. And even it was held at the Gold Coast the second year. So I actually flew back up to Brisbane to support him. And it was intense because I just remember everyone around him being like, you've got this in the bag. And it was like, you know, of course, as his brother, you're partial, but to actually see how he was performing on the days of this event, the 2-day event that they held at the Movie World at the Gold Coast, he was killing it. And I was so confident that he was going to make the top 6 and potentially win it, which he did. So, to move on from there, what was it for you, Matt, after you actually, I remember watching the footage of you being announced the winner at Silverstone when they did that race, the physical racing cars, and your car failed, went into limp mode, and you had to pull over, even though you were leading by a big gap on the rest of the field.
So I think to sum up, so that week, I guess a lot of people don't realize is it was a sim racing competition to get you into sort of the regional part of it. But then once that kind of happened, it was kind of well beyond sim racing. They said, well, we want to make a racing driver, or, we want to pick one that can be a racing driver. We need to test everything else. So that regional event, as you said, we kind of went through everything to see if you could potentially be a racing driver. And then we go to Silverstone, which was my first time ever in Europe. So a crazy thing to think that I could go to Europe and go for a week at Silverstone, and that's already a pretty cool racetrack to be able to go to alone. And then that week alone was to test your fitness, plus no sim racing at all. It was just all these different driving events. So I guess to sort of cut the long story short, but that week was really intense. There was 5 other countries with 30 guys. So one winner, 30 people. You kind of don't think it's going to be you because everyone's, prepared for it. But when we got to that final day, we the way it worked was the final day we had 2 from each country left, and in the morning, what we actually did was we had these Nissan 370Zs at the Silverstone racetrack, and it was our first time actually driving the track, and they had instructors next to us to kind of see how we could perform on a racetrack. And we had Rick Kelly there. So I know if a few of you know Rick Kelly, he was our mentor for that year, and he even got to hop in there as well and evaluate how good we were. So potentially we got our training, and then we got 3 laps. That was it. Rick Kelly was in the car. He didn't say anything, and he had 3 laps back to back from myself and the other finalist for Australia, which was Elliot Shute. And yeah, the best person won to go to the final race. So that all happened, really kind of intense pressure. Got announced that, and I was like, this is awesome. And within half an hour of kind of that happening, we're sitting on the grid as the final person. We qualified on pole, and I was going to, and essentially the way the competition works is if you win the final race, you win the contract, generally speaking. So I started first, and within half an hour on this, kind of got to get my head around this, and I got to win this race. And yeah, a few things didn't go my way. So halfway, we were having a really good battle with one of the guys from Mexico, I think it was, or Turkey, having a really cool battle with him. And then I started pulling away. And then, as all good things can come to an end, the car started overheating, and it started getting limp mode. So quickly fell from first back to third. And then it was an 8-lap race. So by the end of it, I ended up finishing third. And what people don't realize is what happened at the end then was we came into the pits, and we sat there while they deliberated about who was going to win. And it was an hour and a half of them sitting there trying to understand who was going to win. I was sitting there devastated, going, well, I haven't won the final race. I'm not going to win. And everyone around me is going, oh, no, you killed it this week. And I'm like, I'll forget about it. Like, I've done my best. It is what it is. And anyway, long story short, that feeling of when I was up on stage and they did announce myself, and I knew it was between me and the winner that was from Turkey of that final race, was just, I still can't really remember it, which I guess is one of those crazy moments in your life when you can't remember those insane things. But it was just a big blur. And but for such a roller coaster day, I think it was one of those moments that you initially forget kind of how crazy it was, but when you look back at it, it was one of the best moments of my life. So it was pretty cool experience that I wish I could have shared with more people, but it was one of those things. It was, you're over in Europe and you're just working really hard to chase the dream, and end up happening. So that was cool.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I was, they broadcast that all live, and so I was watching it at 1 a.m. And when the car failed, because you could see what was happening with every car, I remember being devastated for you, being like, surely they've got to take that into account. He was pulling away at a 2-3 second lead.
Yeah, that's what I hoped for. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you weren't kidding about the hour and a half deliberation. I fell asleep. It was 2:30 in the morning.
Yep.
I'd worked the next day, and
Yep.
Emma, my partner, my wife, she was a nurse and she'd been working night duty, so she was wide awake. She was watching the stream live in the lounge room, and she came and woke me up and said, your brother's won it. I was like, no way. And it was just
crazy.
incredible. So to explain a bit further to the people listening, Matt was racing in a real car at Silverstone competing for this competition. And it was in 370Zs from memory?
So it was basically almost a road car, but they just obviously kind of tuned it into a race car type thing, but still pretty road spec. But yeah, first time we'd actually got to drive them was that morning. So it was the thing about that competition, which I think worked really well, was about you had to adapt really quick. There was no preparation. They wanted to see if you could do it or not. And if you couldn't, then you're out. So it was pretty cutthroat, which I liked because, as you said, I was able to prepare for it. So thankfully, my preparation helped me in those situations. So it was good.
Yeah, so that kind of sets the stage for everyone how Matt got into racing with no racing background other than being incredibly good in a racing simulator, Gran Turismo. Matt actually set himself up as one of the top in the world, so which is why he was able to qualify and get to this level. Someone that could just hop on Gran Turismo and chuck a lap wouldn't necessarily be able to qualify for this because it was very hotly contended.
It
And
was, yes.
if you got to the top 20 in your region in Australia, for example, and got invited to the Kelly Brothers factory for that competition to see if you were eligible to go overseas, your fitness was a factor. There wasn't just the ability to drive on the game. If you
It was
rocked up and
everything.
you were 130 kilos, you were not going to make it, not out of any kind of prejudice, but just based on pure race fitness, this was not going to cut the mustard. So it was a whole package they were looking
Mhm.
for, not just able to play fast on a controller or a steering wheel.
Yeah.
So Matt really spent that whole year after he failed to qualify in 2014 and just missed out, really impressively dedicating that entire 12 months to giving himself the best chance, because he really wanted to walk away with no stone unturned sort of thing, which was impressive. So,
Yeah.
but moving forward to the endurance series, so you win the contract. They tell you
Mhm.
that you're flying over to the UK. I remember you came home for like 2-3 weeks and then you were
Yeah,
gone again.
barely. Yeah, it was
You,
crazy trying to get your head around it and everyone celebrating, and you're like, I gotta go. And it was
yeah,
literally, it was like,
yeah,
pack your bags, you're gonna be over here. And it was for 5 months, I think, total,
yep,
close to, but it was literally, you got to devote your life for it, which obviously you're gonna go, you're gonna do it. And yeah, within 2 weeks, I was on a plane, um,
yep.
yeah, heading to UK for 5 months.
They were very financially invested in you. That contract
Mhm.
that you won was a lot of people based around you. You had a like mental health person from memory.
I
You
did,
had
yeah. So they looked at
physio.
they evaluated everything. So
Mm,
the fortunate part, I guess, for everyone here is that this GT Academy thing was already a proven success. So it had started from 2008 with the original winner, Lucas Ordonez from Spain. And he is actually up to the point of Nissan globally stopping their racing program. He'd been a factory driver for Nissan for 11 years. So, and he come from sim racing. So essentially, that it was already proven. So for myself, when I arrived in UK, they had the whole program set for 5 months. So it was very much, this is it. You put 100% into it. If you do it, you'll get the results. But we know what works, and we'll adapt it to you. But it's there. Make it happen. And that's when the fun began, I guess. It just, you lived and breathed motorsport and just everything to improve. So some really really cool experiences in the UK and Europe.
yeah, it was super incredible to like be talking with you regularly. You were
Mm.
living close to the track or on the track at Silverstone at the time.
Yeah, close to the track. Yeah,
Yep.
pretty close to it. Milton Keynes. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
about
right.
20 minutes out from Silverstone.
Yeah. And I remember talking to you and having a little giggle at the end of that, close to the end of the 5 month period. For these license tests, as part of getting your international racing license, you had to compete in amateur races. So, like an
Yeah.
MX5 Cup, the Janetta Cup, there was a couple of
Yep.
races you did that you were given almost like in the video game a test to go, you start in 12th, you need to get up to third, or you need to
Yeah.
do this. And you won so many of these amateur races that you weren't able to bring all these trophies home with you in
Yeah, it
your
was
suitcase.
crazy. They just kind of said, "We'll just kind of leave them here, and you can grab them when you can."
Yeah,
It was just weird. I didn't expect it. You're just going to a racetrack, and I think just enjoying the chance to be able to drive cars. Like I never got to go to a racetrack and race cars, so I was like, okay, let's hop in something new every weekend. Essentially, it was almost every weekend. I
yep.
was hopping in something new, and they're going, okay, new track, new car, have fun, and let's see you improve. And that was the formula that worked. I think it was, they just chucked you in the deep end, and you had to swim. That was in it.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, it worked. So
Yeah, yeah, I found it hilarious that you were not only achieving these tasks, but actually blitzing a field of people that have been racing in the series for years, and you literally barely stepped on a racetrack, which
yeah,
showed
it's crazy.
that
I
you
still
had
couldn't.
talent. Mm.
Yeah, I couldn't even put. I guess it goes back to the start when you used to say when we first used to race in the PlayStation. I couldn't explain how I did it, and I still can't. And it was
Yeah,
actually kind of similar to even on the track. After a while, you started getting to understand what you had to do, and I guess that's confidence with any looking at the supercar drivers, and that it all comes back to experience and time on track. You can't beat that. So, but initially, I was kind of just doing it on pure enjoyment of being able to do it, and then
mm.
as you say, when the contract started in 2016 as a factory driver, it got very serious. Like you were part of the global brand now, and you were, yeah, you had to perform.
Yeah. Let's move on to that. So you've done all your driver training, you've
Yep.
fulfilled your contract requirement, the offer that they've given you to qualify and get your international racing license, so you can race. At that point, you thought you were going to race at Dubai 24-hour, which is the standard for
It
the
is, yeah.
GT
So
Academy.
that's for everyone, yeah.
Yep.
And with the potential to race beyond that, but as you say, it's all based on your evaluation of the program. Yeah, it is unknown.
Yeah, and then obviously the people at GT Global or GT Academy spoke with Nissan in Australia, and Richard Emery, the CEO of Nissan at the time, called you on a Skype call. Zoom wasn't around then, or if it was, it wasn't as well known.
Oh, yeah, Skype then, yeah.
Yeah, and offered you an amazing contract opportunity to say that, don't worry about Dubai 24-hour. We're going to skip that race, which sadly probably would have been awesome to race at, but
just preparation, yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
But it was actually a stitch up. So when Richard Emery, they'd organised it. So Richard Emery was quite funny. I think he really enjoyed the process, and it was a bit of a stitch up because they said someone else was calling from Nissan, and then when I got on the Skype, and then you see it, and you're like, "Oh, this is the CEO. CEO, I need to okay, I've showered, I look good, I'm okay." Like I'm on a video screen with the CEO. And then he just starts talking about things. I'm like, well, maybe we're just doing a catch up, because he hasn't chatted to me for about a month or two. It was pretty good. And then that offer happened. But it was a bit of a stitch up. So it caught me by surprise, which is what they wanted, I guess. But it was pretty cool.
Yeah, they recorded that, and there's a lot of this on YouTube. So
it is, yeah.
I might send some links to Tony and Andrew to share in a newsletter or something. But
yeah, sure.
There's some YouTube videos of this, and they actually recorded that Skype call, and Nissan Emery is all recorded by Nissan to kind of gauge Matt's, reaction to not only succeeding in his contract obligation and what they offered him, but being offered a fully fledged Nissan Factory Driver. And I remember the conversation. I don't know if you remember, but after that, when you were getting ready for the 2016 season, which is what we're about to move on to and talk about. Sorry for those waiting to hear about the actual juicy racing bits. You called me and said it's super surreal. Your passport now says occupation racing driver, which is like, what an incredible thing.
Yeah, I know. Like that was, it's those little things, which I know a lot of people, I guess some people will take the privilege of it. And I was just soaking those little things up. Like I just couldn't believe it. Like you looked at a race car and you had your name on it. And you're like, say what? And then you got your passport. You're having to write occupation racing driver before you come in, which is quite funny because they read it when you go into the UK or anywhere in Europe, and they go, "Oh, you're a racing driver. Oh, who do you race for?" And they start asking questions and all these sort of things. So yeah, it was pretty weird. Something I never got used to, but it was cool.
Yeah, an incredible thing and a great highlight to tell. In the future about your racing history. It was such a cool thing, I think, because not being able to come up through the traditional means of motorsport, like the last monthly meeting where we talked to Jim Richards, where he started with his dad in go-karts and then moved up into just basic cars and then just enjoying competing and getting to a level where people notice you. You leapfrogged all that with this amazing opportunity. And then we land in 2016. It's the GT3 Blancpain sponsored endurance series, so 6 races I think for the year from memory, and 7.
Pretty much, it was 5 total for Blancpain for 2016. Okay. But so endurance series wise, it's basically regarded as, if you look at Bathurst 12-hour, for instance, for kind of, it's literally an international field. It's the best GT3 drivers there are. So, and it's broken up into pro class and pro-am class. So, of course, as you say, I started as a pro-am, so an amateur, paired up with another pro and an amateur as well. But it's still, like, you're talking fields of 60 to 70 GT3 cars. Like, literally, it was, I can't even begin to tell you how crazy that is when I think get some pretty decent fields here with some of our local and state races, but to have 60 and 70 full-blown GT3 cars, and half of them are full factory, pro drivers, it was pretty surreal to just be arriving in the paddock and then knowing you're going to be racing out there with them. So, pretty cool when we first arrived at Monza. Like, it was surreal.
Yeah, that must have been incredible, because I remember talking to you pre-Monza race and just being like, "How you feeling? What's the feel?" And you were ready, you were excited, you were keen to get out there. And from memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you started the race.
No, not for that
No,
one.
no,
So I finished the race. So it
that's
was a
right.
3-hour race at Monza, and with 3 drivers, it's 1 hour each. So I finished the race. Unfortunately, we actually had a mechanical issue. So I felt like at a pivotal times in my motorsport career, we were having some mechanical issues. So the 370Z at Silverstone, and now the GTR at Monza. But these things happen. It's motorsport. But we finished the race and just finished out of the top 10 for Pro Am. But it was but yeah, it was pretty cool to get that checkered flag. That was kind of a nice touch to your first race, an endurance race, to finish it for the team. So that was cool.
Yeah. So to those listening, to paint the picture, you're now racing for RJN Motorsport, a team that's a
Mhm.
Nissan Factory backed team,
Yep.
and they've got 2 cars, car 23 and car 22.
Yep.
And Matt was in car 22, which you can see a picture of it in the background behind his camera, which is
That's
the
the one. Yep.
the
That's the
second year.
2017
It's
one. Yep. That's it.
2017 car, different livery on the 2016. But basically, the endurance series meant you had 3 drivers in each car. So they had 6 drivers in the team, and they were
Mhm.
both 3 drivers were dedicated to one car and another 3 dedicated to
Yep.
another. So whatever race you had, if it was a 3, 6, 12, 24 hour, your stints were broken up. But what it
Yep.
meant was is that, yeah, you were racing as a team, and obviously endurance racing is quite taxing. When you talk about Bathurst here in Australia, it's an incredible endurance race for Australian drivers, and what a challenging track. But anyway,
Yeah.
so Monza is the debut. You've gone
Yep.
out, you've got to finish the race, see the flag, which is awesome. I remember watching the race and being super excited for you, and obviously disappointed the car had mechanical issues. But
Yeah.
and then yeah. So what was some highlights from that year? What did you learn? How did you feel
Yeah.
being against these big players, big money teams? We're talking Lamborghinis, Porsches,
Everyone.
Ferraris,
Yeah.
Bentleys. All the big teams were there as factory drivers and private teams. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think actually one of the craziest highlights for me was, well, two. It's hard to put that down for my first year. One was Silverstone, so that was the second round, which was about a month later, which was another 3-hour race. So typically, being the AM drivers, you won't generally start a race. And as I said, RGN, as you say, are Nismo factory backed or Nissan factory backed, but they're also the ones that have basically run the GT Academy program beyond the contract. Um, and so they're well aware of how to use, get the most out of their GT Academy graduates in their first year of professional racing. So they generally don't have you start like ever in your first season for these big, massive races. So it was going to be our pro, which was Sean Walkinshaw, which you'll all know that obviously Tom Walkinshaw, it's his brother, Ryan, his brother, Sean Walkinshaw, that now lives in UK and Japan. He was our pro. He was going to be starting the race. I remember this really well, within an hour of starting the race, when we had to go out onto the grid, our engineers come over to us and said, Matt, can you start?
Which race was this?
This was Silverstones. This is the
That's right.
second race. Yeah.
Mm.
And I've just gone, it kind of wasn't an open ended question. It was a closed question. It was like, can you start? And I'm like, sure. So I went and got kitted up and everything. I'm one of those people that needs to go to the toilet if something big's going to happen. You get a bit nervous, so I've been like kitted up and had to go to the toilet 2 or 3 times before having to get in the car. And then we get out onto the grid, and I think we qualified like 32nd out of 70 cars, which I know sounds weird, but it's actually pretty big. Like it's a good qualifying result with such a big grid. Um, and yeah, within 45 minutes, I'm sitting out on the grid and we're doing our formation lap and about to start. So that was my biggest rush of the year, was starting in a grid like that. It went pretty well. I went from 32nd to 24th on the first lap. So I just sent it, as I'd say, and worked out all right. So I had a good knack for starts. And yeah, that was our best result of the season too, where we finished 7th in class, and I think 19th overall or something like that from memory. So yeah, I put that down to my start, and that's why we got our best result. I'll take that.
Yeah.
And then the next highlight, I guess, was Spa, which I guess we can talk about more in 2017. But
Yeah.
yeah, Spa was incredible to be able. You go to a test day for the 24-hour race, where it's a dedicated day for the teams to run their programs,
Hmm.
and I can probably safely say I was probably the scaredest time I'd been in the car for 2016. Was you're going flat out down after turn one, going down to Radion and a Rouge, and you're like, how do you do this? Oh, you got to go pretty much flat, and you're doing almost 230 Ks, and you just got to send it, and they just tell you to keep going faster. The first time I did it, I was like, no, I can't go quicker. And then you look at the pro drivers in the other 23 car, and they've gone like, 10, 20 Ks an hour quicker. I'm like, okay, I need to get bigger peanuts. Like it's just you've just got to find something, and that track demands. It's kind of like Bathurst for Europe in a way. I think a lot of drivers here that have had the chance to drive at Spa have said that. It demands. It's just an iconic track. So yeah, that was probably one of the biggest highlights for 2016 was Spa.
Yeah, and to put it into context as well, like the whole time you're in this car, it's not like you've been racing for last 10, 15 years to get to this level.
No,
You've had
you're
a crash
learning on the
course
fly.
over 6 months,
Mm.
and then you've had 1 or 2 races, and then they're asking you to compete in a race that's, 24-hour race, one of the most demanding tracks in the world. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I was fortunate enough, or so were a lot of people, that Nissan in Australia was really wanting to milk this opportunity, with Matt being the first Australian person ever to win this contract. So every race was broadcast live on YouTube, and they had a secondary live view camera of in car. So I was communicating with Matt on Facebook, and I'd find out when he was about to get in the car. And so then I could watch his stints in car, and on a second screen, watch the actual race and the telemetry. And yeah, I didn't know anything about the Endurance series until I started watching it, and it is an incredible series. So if you haven't had anything to do with it, if you get a chance to watch it on whatever streaming service you have, check it out. But moving on, so 2016 was an incredible year. You go as a pro-am, and when you were talking about the qualifying before, people need to realize that there is basically 2 races going on in the one. So the pros are racing against all the other pros.
Yep.
And you can get battled up with a pro-am that's slower, like someone like yourself that maybe had never been to Spa before, wasn't able to go through that corner at the speeds the pros were doing. So they're having to drive their race against other pros around pro-am drivers, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's challenging.
Yeah. So there's essentially 2 races going on at once, 70 cars plus in the field. And I'm just really curious to, like, what was it like driving this $1 million race car and having to, listen to the team talk to you over the controls, having to memorize how to use the steering wheel and all the controls in the car. There was a lot going on that first year,
That was a good one. Yeah, I think one of the crazy tests we had to do actually before we even were able to go to Monza was it's literally the blindfold test, but they literally have to blindfold you, and you sit in the cockpit, and you have to actually memorize all the steering wheel buttons, and they'll call it, and they'll tell you over the radio, and you've got to press the right button, and you have to get it 100% every time. So then it's kind of you're doing it without thinking. So those are the little things that I guess you don't really think about when you go, I'm a racing driver. Like they think you just do think that you just hop on the track and you drive, which is one element. But then you got the other side, which, like you say, is radio, hydration. So I was very, very bad at not drinking when I drove, which was not a good thing in endurance, because you're always driving for a minimum an hour.
Yeah, these aren't air-conditioned cars either.
No,
you're in a race suit on a hot track.
Yeah, we don't run
European summer.
Yeah, we don't run cool suits or anything. So cabin temperatures used to sit between 45 to 55 degrees. So at Paul Ricard, which is southern France, was one of our 6-hour races. And I remember one of the weekends there, the cabin got as hot as 60 degrees. And you'd come out, you've lost a few kilos, and you're going to have to put as much water back into your system before you hop back in the car again. So the endurance element was challenging. And the other part was pit stops. So pit stops actually was like we always see with supercars and everything, most categories, it's make or break. It's where you can lose a lot of time and where you can make up a lot of time. And pit stops was a whole new thing to me as well, like having to do driver changes and everything, and memorizing and making it work with the other teammates. We had a compromised seating position too for a lot of these races in 2016. So we had to kind of all sit in a position that we're all comfortable. Fortunately, we didn't have someone that was 7 foot and someone 5 foot, but we're all pretty similar build. So that helped. But yeah, those were the challenges and then plus you had to learn how these tracks really quickly and get up to speed, which I think was probably the easier part, thankfully. But all the other things were the challenges, to be honest. And that was understanding the feedback to get it back to your engineers. So because you're focusing so much on learning the track. I remember I did one session and I'd come back and they'd be like, "How was the car?" And I actually couldn't report back. I felt crap because I couldn't, because I was focusing so much on learning the track. I wasn't learning what the car was doing. So I couldn't actually tell them how the car was.
Mm.
I was just like, I think it was okay. And, and yeah, so that sort of side of it was, for some people, it maybe comes more naturally. For me, it took a little bit more time. But
Mm.
yeah, throughout the 2016 year, it got a lot easier for those things to, yeah, become more natural.
Yeah, what a wild ride. 2016 being like just thrown in the deep end, obviously with the training in the year
Yeah.
before. But I guess, yeah, so to move to 2017,
Yep.
like you've now, they've announced the drivers for the year,
Yep.
and you got announced with RGN again, and I was really excited for that.
Yeah, that was an amazing moment, because the best thing you can ever have as a young driver is to have consistency, and to have that, to go back to a team, they know you, you know them, you're going back to the same tracks again, so you don't have to learn them again. For me, it's the best way you can get to the best season you can have, an opportunity to progress further. So yeah, that was a big announcement, and that was a big effort from everyone involved, Nissan and Australia and Nissan Global and Nismo, to make that happen. But obviously they saw something and they wanted to continue to have me in now the pro class. And now we're stacked up against the best GT3 drivers in the world. Guys
Yeah.
like Campbell, that's now in Porsche. He's been part of the factory team for a few years now. He is one of the best GT3 drivers in the world. Massive respect for what he's achieved. But these
Mm.
sort of drivers, they're absolutely they're the best. And you're now going to be teamed up, racing against them. So now you're going for outright victory. That's
Yeah.
potentially what you're doing. So it's another level, which was cool.
Yeah, there was almost no pulling punches in 2017. So
No.
you've returned, you've gone to Monza again. I remember you being very nervous, but also really confident that
Yep.
you've got experience this year. It's not a new thing. So
Yep.
I guess because we've gone quite a bit of time now,
Yep. Sorry.
no, don't be sorry. I'm the one that's dragging it out. I'm supposed to control that. But so 2017, you've been invited back. You feel like this racing career is starting to get legs, which it
Mhm.
did, and you're now getting merited on your own driving ability. You're a pro driver. They've
Mhm.
invited you back because of merit, not because of anything else. Plenty of other drivers that could have filled that seat, but they
Oh yeah.
really wanted to work with you. And to RGN, motorsports management team's credit. So 2017, you come back with experience. What was what was the takeaways that year? Because I remember watching, thinking it was incredible. Like, you were so consistent that year. Your lap times on the telemetry within tenth of a second of themselves. You're able to conserve tires. There was
Mhm.
obviously the 24-hour Spa race, which I stayed awake for and nearly
Yep.
died myself from exhaustion. So
Yeah.
I don't know how you physically went out in the car and raced
Yeah.
it. So give me some dot point summaries of why 2017 was such an awesome year.
So 2017, one of the coolest experiences was first race Monza. We're right up there. We qualified sixth, so sixth outright, and we actually got up high as third. Had an issue in a pit stop, so got us back to ninth. But then I was battling guys like James Collado, so he's a factory Ferrari driver and now races in Formula E. And one of the Bentley factory drivers. So I was racing these guys, and for me, I was like, this was crazy. So that was a huge highlight for Monza, and end up holding position and racing them. So I kind of felt like I belonged, which is a big confidence boost. The biggest highlight for me that year was Spa. So for everyone, 24 hours is a whole achievement, not just a driver, it's the team. If you get to that flag, and we know plenty of people, Shane Van Gisbergen's done McLaren, um, 24 hours with Spa 3 times and only finished once. I fortunately got to do it twice and finish twice. And so very fortunate to get to that flag. But we went through a roller coaster. So the car actually got crashed out in qualifying and completely ridden off. So it crashed at Eau Rouge and hit the wall at 240 k's an hour, and the car was done. Driver was safe, so that was great. He was no problems, but the car was gone. So the team did a 36-hour rebuild on another chassis to get us ready for the race.
This is all on YouTube as well, everyone.
It
Like,
is,
I'll send
yep.
links. You can see the rebuild and sped up
Unbelievable.
time. It's what they did was incredible. Yeah.
And this is a small team. Like, yeah, they're factory back from Nissan, but you're versing guys like Mercedes and Audi that are Germany. They're in Europe and they've got 6 cars and they've just got unlimited resources. So this is basically almost a family team running in a world stage. So they were doing incredible things. But yeah, the car got rebuilt on a new chassis. And then we went into the race. We started in the pit lane because we used a new car. So we've gone from potentially we're going to start 20th to 70th. So starting last in the pit lane.
Yeah. To explain that too, they made him start in pit lane because the rules stated that car, they'd used a different chassis shell,
Yep.
even though they transported all the salvageable parts to that car to get it ready. That chassis number technically had not qualified. So
Agreed.
therefore they had to start from pit lane. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we started and my teammates Drew and Moore started. He got to Lacombe, which is like the 3rd corner out of the pits. Actually, it's the 1st corner out of the pits because you miss Radillon and Arouge. He got to the 1st corner and the car cut out. And he ended up on the side. And we're like, well, it's over. And I felt gutted for the team because they done an all-nighter to get this car ready. And anyway, so he had to actually get the team on the side. They rushed up to the corner and they can't work on the car when it's on live track. But he had to basically reconnect something in the fuel lines for it to be able to work, basically get it to run again. Fixed it.
So you got a driver repairing the car on track. It's crazy, isn't it?
This is an insane story. So at that point, race is still going. It's not yellow flagged because we're actually far enough off. So at that point, also with the new chassis and powertrain, they with a new engine, we also had another penalty. So not only did you have to start from the pits, there was also a 5-minute penalty, stop-go penalty, that you had to serve in the first 3 laps. So not only have we started from the pit lane, been stuck on the corner with a fuel pump issue, then he limped it or got it back, got it in, and we had to sit there for 5 minutes. So long story short, in the first 15 minutes, we hadn't completed a lap, basically, and we were 8 laps down straight away off the bat.
Not a good start.
Not for our sort of pro race. So 3 drivers. It's 8 hours we each have to do over 24 hours. So obviously it's not 8 hours straight, but we break it up into 2 3-hour stints, and you're pitting every hour for fuel. So we were just like, we just got to try and finish the race. That was it. And let's just race and drive as hard as we could. The other fun fact was that I hopped in the car in the 2nd hour and I'd never driven the car because it's a completely new car. So you kind of don't know what to expect. You don't know what the car's going to be like. They don't know. You haven't heard from the driver. So you're going down into Arouge for the first time. You're like, I don't know what the car's going to be like. So that was a whole nother story level. But yeah, so basically we worked our way up. The sister car qualified 15th. And up until the first 12 hours, we'd gone from 70th to 25th. So we basically clawed our way all the way back up to being less than a lap off our team, other car. And then at 3 a.m, I was driving. So midnight was probably the scariest time I'd ever been in a race car. So 3 a.m, pitch black. There's no lights around on this track, and it starts raining. And I'm just like, oh, it's a little bit of rain. I'll be fine. I'm on slicks. I go past the pit lane, and I remember this message to this day. My engineer goes, try and get the car back. And I'm like, wait, what? So at that point, it bucketed down rain. I'm on slicks, and the top 3 just crashed out because they were all stuck on slicks as well. So I somehow got it around without crashing. And that was the scariest 3 minutes of my life in a race car at 3 a.m. in the morning at Spa. I know it sounds weird, but it was, yeah. But long story short, we had a roller coaster. We got ourselves up to 15th with an hour to go. And then our diff broke. So our diff let go in the last hour. Our team rebuilt, replaced the diff with 45 minutes to go, and we finished the race in 30 seconds. So to sum it up, the craziest 24 hours, but we finished it. So that was my highlight, just to be able to yeah, say we finished Spa after everything that happened.
Yeah, I was watching the onboard lap when you were in there in the wet, and there was definitely some crossed up moments where I was like,
Oh,
Jesus, this is very scary. And then also going back to the diff, like to explain, an R35 GTR is all-wheel drive,
it is,
but
yep.
this series, everything's rear-wheel drive. So this is a
Yep.
rear-wheel drive converted car. So it's not a compromised driveline, but it's not the driveline that the Nissan engineers had set up for this car originally. So
Mhm.
this is a dedicated race car. It's obviously built, purpose-built to be rear-wheel drive, but you're out there on the slicks, bucketing down rain in one of the most technical tracks in the world in a rear-wheel drive 600 horsepower GTR.
And you don't know how hard it's raining because, like,
Mm,
when it's at night, you can't see, and when you're going at speed, you can't register how wet it is. So it was literally, I think it was pure luck. It
mm,
really was. I can't say
yep.
it was skills; it was just luck.
No.
I didn't find the wet aquaplane puddles that would put me in the wall. I
Yeah.
just dodged them somehow and got it
Oh,
back. And I still don't know to this day how I got it back. But
I had two screens up. So I had the race screen, which was just showing cars coming off track left,
yeah,
right, and center, and coming off track catastrophically, like actually crashing out and ruining their
yeah,
car, not
huge.
just going into gravel traps, like hitting walls and having a really bad day
Mhm.
after such a long race and all the efforts put in to get to this point. And then on the other screen, I'm watching your in car and just being like, oh my God, like, please do not crash out. I know you're doing everything you can. So it was an incredible
Yeah,
race. But yeah,
yeah, it
so
was.
2017 wraps up.
Yep.
And this is at the point when Nissan is basically looking at pulling out of racing, basically worldwide, which people might remember from V8 Supercars. They pulled their contract from V8 Supercars, and the Kelly brothers went away
Mhm.
from Nissan. So, heartbreaking situation because RGN Motorsport obviously wanted to bring you back for that third year, but without Nissan backing, very hard to do so.
Yeah, it was a partnership, and they wanted to continue. Even Nissan Global wanted to continue, but
Mm,
it had to actually work as part of their global market and their motorsport, and it just wasn't to be. But I think at that time I was pretty devastated. But let's be honest, I got to race 2 years in Europe. I think it was just,
incredible.
I think at that point I felt like I had more to give because I was kind of now when I was hitting my peak, I was really getting confidence. I'm like, okay, let's go again. I'm ready. What else can we achieve? And let's really start going for it. But
Yeah.
not to be, but yeah, to get 2 years in Europe from, as you say, I was sim racing 2 years prior. It was nuts.
Yeah, you raced at some of the tracks we dreamed about ever visiting, let
Mhm.
alone actually being there as a announced racer. It was
Yeah,
incredible. So I was super proud to watch you race. Obviously, I'm
thank
biased on
you.
that, but yeah. So we'll just wrap it up soon and off for questions because I know it was meant to go for half an hour. We've gone a bit over, but so you've come back to Australia and now it's the Nissan thing's disappeared. And I remember
Yep.
helping you try and get sponsorship opportunities, talking to people,
Mhm.
looking at the Porsche Carrera Cup and a couple other things. And you end up landing with Milden Motorsport, which is in the TCR series.
Yep.
And they're going to be a Subaru. They've got the license to develop the Subaru WRX for the
Mhm.
series. And they're talking to you about being a development driver. So your first touchdown in Australia was at the Bend Motorsport Park.
It was. So it was the end of the 2019 series. As I say, exactly that. Milton Motorsport got the contract for Subaru, and we're looking at developing a whole new vehicle. And that was a pretty cool thing. They saw something in me. We did some tests, and we landed at the Bend. Now, what's crazy is people would look and go, "Oh, you must have raced in Australia everywhere." I'd actually never raced in Australia ever. I'd only
Mm.
ever raced in Europe and then came back home. So I had, I guess, this experience, but never got to show it in Australia. So to get the opportunity, then we got the sponsorship together to do the last round of TCR and at the Bend. And obviously, we can't plan what will happen in 2020, but essentially for pre-COVID, got to do that race. Absolutely had a blast. We're in a very underdeveloped vehicle, so we weren't there for results, but it was just about, for me, it was about getting experience to race at home. Um, and yeah, so fast forwarding from that, we had big plans, but obviously when COVID hit, um, everything changed. So
Yeah, you're at Formula One and actually on track, well, in the pits with the
yeah,
team when they called it off. I remember messaging
yeah,
you being like, "What's happening?" Because they're not letting people in, and
so
you were
yeah,
like,
mm.
"Yeah,
So yeah, we were looking at getting a racing program together for 2020, not looking at the OSGP, and I was just there to help the team out. I'm there to help, and yeah, and then it just all went belly up Saturday morning. they're about to get the cars on track, and everything got cancelled. And then we knew how serious it was. So I guess now it's very much a challenge to be able to get sponsorship in this time. And I'd love to continue racing. And my dream is to race at Bathurst one day, in any category. But just to be able to do that one day will be, I guess, my final bucket list to be able to achieve when racing.
Yeah, well, Bathurst 12 Hour, which has all these kind of GT3 style cars there, and there's been a couple of GTRs, GT3 Nissans there over the years. There's been a couple of opportunities that nearly came up for you, but I mean, hopefully moving forward, that's something we can get you there. Because for those that don't know, Matt on Gran Turismo is almost unbeaten on Bathurst. It is literally his track. We've both done thousands of hours around there. It's the only track I can actually kind of keep up with Matt in the game. But he still blitzes me, which I'm not ashamed of anymore. But yeah, what I'm getting at is that to actually see Matt race in Australia and be able to go trackside and support him there, hopefully that happens. But you never know. I'm not giving up hope, and I'll obviously push every way I can to try and get you a seat. But
I appreciate it. I'm
yeah.
happy with what I've achieved so far, and I hope you'll enjoy the journey, I guess, that I had. It was pretty surreal.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it with the club. I know that this is a whole bunch of Nissan guys here, so they're really obviously acutely passionate of Nissan racing. So yeah, but I guess what I can do now is throw it back to Tony and offer the opportunity for some members to ask some questions if we've got enough time. But thanks Matt for offering your time to have a chat, and I hope our explanation of Matt's racing made sense. All right, I'll throw over to you, Tony.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Just getting a bit of feedback here. How good was that? I think that deserves a round of applause. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Excuse my ignorance.
Yeah.
Is there GT3 races standing start or rolling start? Rolling.
Sorry, Tony. If you want to mute your audio, what I can do is get Tony or Andrew to write the questions into the chat for Zoom, and I can ask them, because I don't think they're quite audible with the feedback. Sorry. The question was, Matt, one of the members there at the Tower Hotel at Hawthorn just asked, forgive his ignorance, but were these a rolling start or a still start? I think we've lost your audio, Matt.
Are we back?
Yep,
there we go.
You're good. Yep.
Sorry about that. Good old technology. So yeah, they are rolling starts, so not standing. So these cars were built with traction control and ABS and aids, but the idea is they're actually not built to be launched from a standstill. So all GT3 cars, with the amount of torque and that they actually produce and the way they work. So yeah, rolling starts, which means they're really, really, really close, because everyone's starting at 60 to 80 k's an hour, and yeah, it's pretty intense. I did, I think, 4 starts in total in my career, and every single one was chaos. When you got 70 cars all going into one corner, doesn't always end well. So it was pretty crazy. And when you're in mid pack, it's just nuts, like just crazy. It's a blur.
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking to watch, especially in the races where I knew you were starting, and obviously excited for you to be able to do, as you said, send it and get some positions, which is where you make a lot of positions at the start of a race as a start. But yeah, nerve-wracking, obviously. I got another question here from Anthony, one of the other members in the club. I'm thinking that sims have come a long way since 2015. How far apart was the transition from sim racing to real car back in 2015?
Yeah, good question. I think it was pretty comparable. Definitely right. Sim racing and the technology has advanced so much that you can, if you put the time in and you apply yourself, you can really put it together. So for some people, it's more natural than others. I know some really quick sim racing guys that literally came to the movie world and they didn't know how to drive the car. They didn't have a license and didn't know how to drive it. I remember
that. He didn't know how to drive a manual, and he kept bunny hopping, and he'd wasted somebody's opportunity to compete when he didn't know how to drive a real car.
Correct. And he was actually one of the fastest sim racing guys in Australia, and a super nice guy, but just, didn't translate for him. So I think it still comes down to preference, or it's personalized to each person from sim racing. So some can apply it better. So I think, in short, it does transfer really well now. And you're seeing that with some really good upcoming sim racing guys like James Baldwin. He just did McLaren last year and actually raced with Jenson Button in GT3s over in British GT. And he was literally lapping like a second or second and a half faster than some of the amateur drivers that have been racing in that category. Like, he's transitioning to be one of the quickest sim racing to real racing guys ever. So it comes down to it definitely does work. You just got to put the time in, and for some people it's more natural than others, but it transfers, and it's all down to fear. I know everyone says you can't press the reset button, and I know that's a common thing. I used to get that all the time, and that's fair enough. I come from sim racing, but you were right, and you had to overcome that. You had to just know that you couldn't go over that line, and if you did, there was consequences, unlike sim racing. But you had to certainly get yourself up to that line pretty quickly. And if you could do that quicker than others, that's what made you shine. And that's what gave you opportunities like GT Academy, I think, in a nutshell. And that's what they're pushing for in a lot of other competitions in the future.
Yeah, it seems like it can translate. Like you like, I copped a lot of crap from my car mates being like, "Oh yeah, you reckon your brother's going to make it?" Like when he gets on track, and I'm like, yeah, like, because you had this iron will to make it work, but it doesn't always work, I guess. But the simulator definitely set you up. So
100%.
I'm going to offer it to other questions on people in the Zoom chat as well, if there's nobody else in the actual chat. So obviously all your microphones are muted, but if you want to unmute your mic and ask a question, feel free. If there's any other questions. No? All right. Well, one last little bit of info is wouldn't be fair to have Matt on the chat if he wasn't actually a Nissan owner. And Matthew's actually owned a couple of incredible cars. So his first Nissan was actually R33, sorry, GTST. So just a manual turbo, black one. I remember picking it up with you.
So he has a 93, so 1993 Series 1 R33 GTST with some mild modifications. I was kind of known as the Japanese GDR kind of addict when I was a kid. That's all I wanted to own and drive. So it's quite ironic that when I got to land my racing career, it was with Nissan and GDR, which was quite cool.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, I upgraded to a good upgrade, and that was to a Series 1 again, but 1995 R33 GDR, and that was a V-spec. So if you're aware of those additions, it's basically just a change to the suspension, mildly updated with the Ateza system as well. So a couple of nice additions, but yeah, I don't currently own a GDR at the moment, but I kind of, one of those sad days when I got rid of it, but I'd love to own one in the future, whether it be the 32 or 34, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, the prices they're commanding now on 32s and 33s and even 34s is ridiculous. But we got another question from the people in Hawthorne. So what training and driving opportunities did you have in Australia prior to getting your overseas opportunity? So I think they're asking about like your track days and if anybody allowed you to do any kind of racing before you went to Europe.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it was pretty limited. I think for me, I was just enjoying focusing on sim racing because I knew opportunities like being able to join GT Academy could be possible. But yeah, I did some karting and did some local karting and so forth in Queensland, which was quite competitive, and got to learn some racecraft as you do with karting, and did some track days at some local track days at Queensland Raceway, and also with, if you're aware of John Boston, he runs track school down at Wakefield Park. That was a big part of my preparation for GT Academy, was to go down there and drive his cars with him, and he basically teach me throughout, or kind of improve my understanding of racing and lines and all that. So very little. I didn't really have much opportunities, but I think I just fully focused on, I guess, what I could maybe achieve, which was sim racing to real racing. So, but yeah, pretty limited prior to the big one, which was overseas.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up. But just one last final thing from me, which isn't a question, more a statement. At my Bucks party, we went go-kart racing.
And, here we go.
And while I may not beat Matt regularly in in sim racing or in potentially a proper Nissan GTR, I absolutely beat him in go-karting on my Bucks night. So
This
just
is
wanted to put that out
confirmed.
there.
Yep. I'm not going to lie. It may have been because it was your Bucks night that the win, but I'll leave it at that. Everyone can make their own judgment on that.
Yeah, I've still got the trophy here just to confirm. But anyway,
No, I love it. That was great.
Yeah. No, thanks again, Matt. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat, and I hope everyone enjoyed that and got something out of it, even though it's not someone with an illustrious long racing career. What Matt managed to achieve from basically nothing and from a family that we didn't have a lot of money. We were raised by my mum and didn't have the opportunities to go and build crazy cars. And the time when Matt got his R33 GTR was definitely towards his early 20s. So not something that we could set ourselves up in racing. It was really impressive to see what you're able to do with an opportunity you were given. So well done. Thanks.
Well, thanks, everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it. It's been cool to share some of the little
Cheers.
insights. So thanks, everyone.
Right. I hand it over to you, Tony. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Bye.